All right. Good morning, Doug. We haven't talked about the election yet. Now, it seems like it's kind of long in the past already, although some results are still not available, apparently. What are your thoughts?
I think that the election process in the US is over the hill, no longer serves much of a useful purpose, actually. It's totally broken and corrupt. As I guess anybody that knows me knows, I don't vote. And in fact, one of my most dangerous hours in public was when I was on the Donahue show in 1980, the day before, my timing was perfect in being invited on that show, the day before the national election between Reagan and Carter. And Donahue asked me, well, what, long story, I'm not going to go into it now, but you're not voting? And I got as far as giving him, I think, 4 out of the 5 reasons why I wasn't voting the next day. And it's a good thing, because the 5th reason was your vote doesn't count. And the audience probably would have torn me limb from limb if I'd said that on national TV on the most popular show in the country at that time.
Yeah.
So, and I still feel that way, but now more than ever. I mean, look, I don't like the Republicans. They don't stand for anything. In fact, from one point of view, you've got to respect the Democrats more than the Republicans, because at least they stand for something. They're bad things, they're destructive, even criminal things that the Democrats stand for, but they actually have a philosophical core. I mean, rotten as it is, the Republicans just say, oh, that's too much, too fast. So they're hypocrites, and of course they're worthy of contempt. The only good thing about the Republicans, and I guess this is mostly due to Trump, is that he's a cultural conservative. He doesn't have any philosophical core either. And his economic beliefs are mainly stupid. But at least he's a cultural conservative. He kind of likes, kind of the values of America of the 50s, as it were. So it's a mess. I'm personally convinced, though, that the Democrats stole this last election very cleverly, just like they stole the election from Trump. I'm convinced that they did. And there are reasons why I feel that, other than just feeling it. I mean, one of them is, well, you look at everything that's happened under the Democrats, none of it has been good, from the, that catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan couldn't have been worse, mismanaged worse, to the fact that prices have exploded and money's been distributed more to the rich guys. I mean, people have got to see this somehow. There's a whole panoply of things. And on top of that, I think historically, in addition to the fact that after 2 years of disaster, people would reflexively want to vote for the other party. In addition to that, historically, I think in the midterms, whoever is in office loses ground. It's just the way it works.
I don't know. There might be an exception, but I'm not aware of it.
I'm not either. So the Democrats are the Jacobins, I should say, because these people aren't even like the Democrats in the old days that, sure, they stole the election between Kennedy and Nixon in Chicago. I mean, this is like a well-known laughable meme. Anybody that lived in Chicago in those days knows it. I mean, it was, everybody knew it. Everybody kind of knew it. But these people are serious political criminals. So I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years from now. We could have a bloody civil war by that time, although not like the one, the unpleasantness of 1861 to 65. That's a long answer. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that's good. I think one of the things it's the approach this time. If you assume well, my base point of view is that it proves, as you've said, that voting doesn't matter. And kind of giving up on electoral process, that delivering a solution. If this doesn't help reinforce that idea, I don't know what will. So it's either that they are really, really very good at stealing elections. I mean, incredibly good at it, or the American people are just total idiots, just total idiots, and they can't be saved by your rare vote of sanity. So I think in either case, that it pulls you not to vote. But the thing about this one, if it was a steal, it was done so much better than the Trump one was, because there was polarizing focus points with that. With this, it's like a wet blanket thrown over things, and so it's like, it just everything goes into slow motion, and it becomes very anticlimactic, and it's all these, it's like, lawyers in back rooms sort of, dickering to make some results show up. And then in the end, it's like, it's 50.4, to 49.6. And you're like, man, it was so close. It was so close, and they're all like that. And it's like, I don't know, it's actually hard to attack it in the same way it would be if it was like something that, where, Saddam Hussein always got 98% of the vote or whatever, 99% of the vote, that doesn't seem right. This is harder to attack.
Well, yes, you're absolutely right. I agree with that completely. And there's something else that we all know it's been in the background, but there's somebody that has been researching exactly what Google has been trying to do with its algorithms. And it's subtle, where they only make these things happen in areas that there are a lot of people that are undecided and in the middle, and they just influence things a little bit and try to get the people out to vote that will probably vote Democrat as opposed to Republican. These people are highly sophisticated in the information that they feed to people, and they've been doing it for the benefit of the leftists. Okay,
That's
it
right.
worked.
Yep.
And it's not against the law, because you're just influencing people. There's no law against trying to influence people. Or
right. And I mean, well, especially when you look in the algorithm at these tech companies, they could even say we're trying to give them the best results, the best customized results. We're not even trying to influence them. We know that they're, likely to vote, and we know that they're undecided, and we know that so we're showing them information we think might help them make a decision they're trying to make.
Yeah, sorry if you disagree with the way we interpret.
They made that choice. It's them. Yeah, are you arguing with the voter? Ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course, the root problem with this is that the government has become so huge, so overweening all areas of life, when actually, and people forget this, the government is coercion, it's force, it's organized violence. So at most, the government should do nothing but protect you from violence. That means a police force, it means an army, and it means a court system to adjudicate disputes without resorting to these things. All of this other stuff, all the regulations and that should all be shit canned. It all should be, and the government should, just be the cop on the corner and a peacekeeper cop, not a law enforcement cop at that.
Peace officer versus law enforcement. Yep. 100%.
Exactly. So I think the situation is pretty hopeless. I don't see what is going to turn it around. Trends in motion stay in motion until a crisis is reached. And I think we're right up against the crisis now. I'm surprised we haven't already had a catastrophic crisis, but they've, yeah.
But I'm sure I mean, I know when people look back at the Great Depression, they look at, stock market crash in 1929, they look at these pivotal moments, but I wonder if then it felt like that to them, or if it felt like more like now, this is like a slow motion train wreck. Like, what I mean? Was it like, well, the way it gets written about in history, it's like, well, here's the inflection point, and then this happened, and then it went downhill or whatever. I mean, that's the way it's kind of retold as something like that. Whereas maybe in the middle of it, it just feels like stuff's messed up. It doesn't feel this inflection point.
Well, and of course, there's this general as the US has gotten bigger and wealthier, attitudes in society change, and that has an influence on things change anyway. I mean, I don't doubt that trends continue as they are. 50 years from now, there's going to be very little relationship between the US of the happy days, like that TV show, I guess, with
Of
the
course,
happy
yeah.
days of the 50s and what the US is going to be like 50 years from now. I mean, there's going to be no relationship. I mean, it's going to be overrun with, migrants from all over the world who have no grip at all on American values and are too large a portion of the population to absorb them. So, it's, I think we're fighting a losing battle. The question is, okay, what's the next war? And I don't know if there's going to be a next war if the bad guys really turn the world into a police state with the success of the Great Reset.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think we have some questions relating to that from our file members. So let's get to those questions. If these all come from people who are members of our private membership group called File, PHYLE.co. We collect these from them through there and try and answer as many of them as we can. So Doug, the first one is, what would you want to put in a time capsule to store for 100 years?
There was a book, I believe the title is The Unincorporated Man, sci-fi.
Yeah.
You read that?
Yep.
Okay, let's see if I'm not confusing the title with a different book. A billionaire puts himself in suspended animation, and he's going to program to wake up in 200 years. I forget what it was. And so he wants to remain a billionaire when he comes out of his time capsule. This is one of the themes of the book. There's others. And turns out that all the gold and silver that he put into the time capsule with him, because of developments with nanotechnology and all kinds of things, asteroid mining and so forth, it's not worth really very much. Okay, I buy that. So what turns out to be worth the most of the physical things he's put in the capsule are his, like some digital watches, which can't be replicated 200 years from now. I mean, they're priceless heirlooms and stuff like that. So, all right, so you got to ask yourself, what's going to happen to technology? And then you got to ask yourself, are you putting stuff in the time capsule for the benefit of other people to help them 100 years from now? Or is it really to, what's the purpose of this time capsule? To preserve things so that you think ought to be preserved, whether or not they're beneficial to mankind in general. I'm not sure how I'd choose things for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, maybe just include season 4 of Rick and Morty or something.
Yes, I would put that.
A good laugh out of it,
So funny. In fact, season 1 through 4, certainly.
Of course. Yeah, I don't know. I think that it's the cultural pieces that will be diminished over 100 years more than certainly technology pieces. Things would become the antiques. All that will be different. But yeah, I think I'd probably want to do something that's funny. I'd probably send something funny, and I wonder if it would even connect because humor changes so vastly over time. But
yeah, the time capsule. Well, there are these people that in some far northern island in Norway, an Arctic island, have put time capsules of every known type of seed, which can be preserved
That's amazing, actually.
Yeah, in case we have a nuclear war or something like that. Okay, that's a pretty helpful kind of time capsule.
Yeah. But you can't think of anything you'd want to put in there. Anything like for your own amusement.
So am I going to be around in 100 years? Is
No,
that
I'd assume you're not, but maybe it's like it's just, it gives you a laugh to think about it, or it gives you amusement to think of somebody, whoever they are, opening it at some point in the future.
Well, this would take some thought, and this is kind of a top of the head, spur of the moment answer, so it can't possibly be a very good one.
Okay. That's okay. We can move on if you don't have any ideas.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. This is kind of an odd question. Is it possible that the advent of agriculture was actually the biggest disaster in human history?
Well, I like the only stupid question is the one that you don't ask.
Yep.
And okay, that's a worthwhile question to ask. Okay, let's attack that, because we've heard the argument that people, when we were hunter gatherers at the end of the ice age 10,000 years ago. I mean, the average human was taller and more muscular and healthy, because he was active and eating whole fruits and whole grains and non-GMO meat. Yeah. Okay, being a hunter-gatherer, a noble savage. Okay, that sounds pretty good.
There's also some connections of the tribe too. I think people feel like, industrial
Yeah.
system, it disconnects everybody, but the tribe had this thing,
Yeah, the 30 people or the 200 people that are,
Yeah.
know who they are, and
And
sure,
you
you're
can
not
contribute to, people know your contribution to it. You know what I mean? It's like,
sure. No, okay, that's great, but that's only that's great. But what happens when you get a toothache? What happens when you need penicillin or any of other antibiotics? What happens when it's, when you're cold and wet and don't have anything but a bearskin rug to wrap yourself in? And, these people basically died when they were all about 30 years old because something would go wrong. You get an infection, you break a leg, that's the end of the story. These things are trivial today. They weren't then. So, I think Hobbes was right. In those days, life was basically solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short for all of its advantages while you're alive. So, and you needed the industrial revolution, the agricultural revolution, because you wouldn't have the industrial revolution or anything else without it. So it's an interesting question, but no, the answer is no.
I think so. I think the positive thing about it is with agriculture, you were able to support more human life more effectively. With more minds, you get more creative energy devoted toward building and creating and advancing civilization. That just wouldn't be possible if you couldn't.
No, without the agricultural revolution, you'd never have developed writing, for instance. I mean, not really, because you don't have the implements to write on in before the agricultural revolution. I mean,
wow, I didn't even think about that one, but that's a good point. Okay, next question. He says, with the state tax benefits getting cut in half in a few years, and with insurance companies likely to default, what exactly does Doug feel good about in setting up his estate?
I'm not a financial planner. Okay. I don't have, they have degrees that they grant where you study these things, the obscure ins and outs of the tax code, and so the government doesn't steal all your money and all that. I don't go in for that type of thing. I actually don't clutter my mind up with it. So what's the question? How should you plan your estate? Do you think is that the big question?
Essentially, there's this little part he adds to it too. He says, does Doug trust the 1031 exchange? Is it set up for the rich, or is it like a trap, to keep your capital tied in real estate? I don't know.
Well, let me see if I recall this correctly. A 1031 is what they call a like-kind exchange. So when you sell something at a capital gain, if you put the money back into a piece of real estate that's similar, you can defer the tax payable. That's basically what it is. So yeah, I've used those a lot in real estate, and you can use them both domestically and with foreign real estate.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, foreign real estate, but it has to be foreign to foreign. So there's all these obscurities, and God knows they could change the law tomorrow morning. And so that's why I try not to clutter my mind up with the details too much. But so is the question again?
Yeah, it's just like, if you had any thought about how you go through in planning your estate, I don't know, setting up your estate.
Look, I've got a lawyer. He's very good, trustworthy, very competent. And I try not to do stupid things, because there are people that when I shed this mortal coil, I'd like them to get my shit, not the government. So yeah, I'm trying to be intelligent about this type of thing, but it's not the first thing on my agenda, if you would.
Yeah, I've never heard you talk about anything like that. So, okay, next question is, what is the best life advice you would give a 15-year-old?
Well, it's tough, because when you're 15, maybe you're not that prone to take good advice, even when it presents itself to you. That's one problem. The best advice would be to find a mentor who knows about things and has wisdom and has judgment and has your best interests at heart. But how do you find one? And it's a problem. So if you can find a mentor, that's really great. You're lucky. You're way ahead of the game. But maybe you won't. So I think the best advice to anybody that's 15 is to realize that you're in this by yourself, basically. You've got to be self-actuated, and it's up to you to increase your abilities as much as you can. That means, learn as much as you can and make the most of try to make the actively, instead of just going along with the tide and drifting, to actively try to learn as much and do as much and be as much as you possibly can. But you may not think about things enough to figure that out. And before you know it, you're 20 and 25, and then you get married, and life is something that happens while we're making other plans.
Something like that. Yes. Doug, when you were 15, if you can remember, think about that a little bit, where you were at that age, and whether it be in film or TV or in books, who was your hero? Like, who was like the person you like respected, admired, or whatever? What was that?
Best take a fictional character, because a fictional character has less flaws than a real life person does. And I would say there are several fictional characters that I was a big fan of. I was a big fan of the Count of Monte Cristo, and I was a big fan of the character Paladin in the series Have Gun Will Travel. And I think that everybody's heard the phrase "Have Gun Will Travel" today.
Yep.
But I don't think anybody watches that series which was on from late 50s, early 60s, starring Richard Boone, who was a fantastic actor, incidentally, the right guy for that role. So I think that one thing that you could do, black and white, with not the best production quality because they didn't have what we have today. But I think somebody that's 15 would profit tremendously by watching that whole series, because the guy that wrote it, I don't know much about him. His name was Herb Meadow, was the guy that basically did it. Guy was sound. He was really sound.
Yeah, we've watched, I don't think we haven't watched all of it, but we watched quite a few seasons of it. I think the thing that I see most lacking among young people now is they do not have a person, fictional or real, that they can admire or emulate. Instead, what they're surrounded with, a bunch of people celebrities who might degrade themselves or whatever else. That's the aspiration for them. And so, which of course is totally unachievable for them. So they can't even imagine how there's a path for them to get where they are to that point, or there's not like characteristics that person has that they can immediately adopt, the way that Paladin conducts himself, the way he talks to other people, the way he is respectful, but clear, but has boundaries. You could adopt those when you're 15 years old immediately. You could start acting like him, start emulating him, which I think is helpful for young people. And I think that separation, people not having role models like that, I think is actually, so my advice would be, this is what I've thought with my kids. I've always tried to find, help them see people that they might be able to admire or connect with in some way, that to have something to try and emulate. So I think that's really helpful, because it's like, I don't know what I want to do with my life when you're 15, who does? But I can see something that I think is awesome. I can see a person who's 30 who's awesome, and I go, man, I just like the way he, I like the fact that he has these weird hobbies, or I like the way that he communicates with people, or I like that he kicks ass, or he's a BJJ black belt or whatever, what I mean? But having some of those things makes it easier. And fiction is a good place to start, but I think you have to foster that in your kids, like helping them see, like, so with my kid, with Max especially, I would like, with men, like historical men, I'd like talk about how, actually there's a book, I can't remember who the guy who wrote it, but it takes these historical figures and it writes about them in terms of them being a badass. So it writes it for like a good, like kind of middle school level kind of humor, but it's a little more vulgar than that. And, but it explains like how it makes these characters bigger than life, and it makes them really interesting. And for a boy, it's exciting. And you can see these people and you go, I want to be more like that guy. I want to be like Achilles, or I want to be more like Odysseus, or, who are these characters who are so disconnected from us now, we don't even understand them. But he talks about them in an interesting way. So I think helping people have something that they can aspire to, a role model they can emulate, I think is a great way to go, fiction or not.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we tend to imitate the people around us. I mean, it's like a fish swimming in water. I mean, if you swim in polluted water, it's not going to be a very healthy fish. So, yeah, I think that you've got to pick out ideals. Now, maybe they're unreachable ideals, but at the same time, listen, we're climbing a mountain, climbing Everest here in life. So it's very helpful to have a Sherpa that knows what he's doing and can keep you from falling off a cliff, or you can watch what he does and imitate him to some degree. No question about it. Yeah, pick a character, both people in real life history and people from fiction, and take the lessons.
Just avoid these silly Marvel characters, which are like the only heroes that are put out today for people to look at,
Yeah, they're totally unrealistic, and avoid popular culture characters that are, loved and respected and rich or whatever they are, because they know how to sing or dance. Well, it's great to know how to sing or dance, but that's not a reason to emulate somebody. These are not moral values. That comes first.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, I mean, you can inculcate those moral values onto somebody because they're trying to emulate people they admire, who they can think, well, what would this person do in this situation? Then that helps them adopt those values, and then it's like an armor against the bullshit, you know. And I
Yeah,
think that's one of the things now. Like everybody is so utilitarian focused. They just go. They don't know who they are enough from a moral perspective, like a line that they will not cross. They haven't thought enough about it. That then they're so easy to manipulate and persuade and move to whatever direction you want. Like Google can use behavioral economics to convince them to go, to take a certain stance on a particular issue because they have no foundation.
yeah, exactly. They really have not thought about what's right and wrong. Do I want to be like this guy or that guy or that guy? They haven't actually thought about it, so they can't make a good choice.
And a lot of it is they tell kids they started this thing at some point, maybe not when I was a kid, but shortly after me, I think, where they're really concerned about the kid's self-esteem. So it's like, you're supposed to tell a kid goes, what do you want to do when you grow up? I want to be president. It's like, oh, you can do it. You're going to be president. It's like, no, you're not. You're not going to be president. Let's be realistic here. So you get kids focused on these totally unrealistic things because you're concerned about, you want them to believe in themselves, but they actually it turns in on them because they eventually at some point realize that there's zero chance that they're going to be that. And so it doesn't give them self-esteem. It actually gives them, it makes them hate themselves.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, anything that a kid says about, I'd like this, or I'd like to be like that, or it's an opportunity to analyze the situation with them, have him pick apart what he really wants and what's good and what's bad and what's practical and I mean, these are subjects of discussion, but so many parents will say, oh, well, that's nice, Billy, or I'm sure you can do it. It should be the launching pad for a discussion with the kids so we can learn something and learn how to think, which they don't teach you in school.
So I'm impressed by that insight that you have as somebody who doesn't have children, because I think that's exactly correct. I mean, I think when you see your kid, it's rare, at different stages of life, it's very rare that they express real curiosity and interest in something. And then when they do, it means something. And you got to flush it out. You got to see how far it can go. And because it is one of those rare opportunities where they are totally on board with seeing what's possible. And that's where real learning can take place.
Exactly. I remember, look, when I don't know how old I was, but I got a book from the library on algebra. And I opened it up. I said, gee, I'd like to learn algebra. And it opened with concepts like X plus Y equal Z. And I didn't understand. Well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. And there was nobody to explain it to me. Nobody to explain it to me. So I put the book back in the library and set my education in that area back 10 years.
It's amazing. It's amazing. If I would have opened an algebra book at 7 years old, I would not have had any curiosity about it. But I know you would have. Okay, so let's see. What's the next question here?
What if only my mother had said, "Oh, well," had started explaining, because these are the concepts themselves are not rocket science, as it were. It would have been most helpful, but I didn't have that. I couldn't make that leap.
Yeah, that's interesting. I totally agree. I think that's a big thing. That's what parents could do. Okay, next question. Do you think the WHO will implement the new COVID passport? And if so, when?
Yeah, I'm pretty confident they're going to try to do that. And I'm also pretty confident, as stupid and subject to hysteria and doing what he's told as the average human is. And it's a great mechanism for control. I mean, it just adds up. I mean, going at it by health dictates, sure, this is the way they're going, and they'll do it. No question about it.
I don't know if you saw that one of the agreements coming out of the G20 in Indonesia was that countries agreed to handle the next pandemic differently with specifically using a vaccine passports connected to a digital ID. I mean, it's right. I mean, might not be there for COVID, but with the next thing that comes, it will. Like the technology's there, infrastructure's there, the agreements are there.
Yeah, the question is how we can resist it, or better yet, to throw a monkey wrench in their plans. And I'm not sure exactly how to do it. Maybe Charles Knight will figure it out in his next installment, which is called Terrorist. Or maybe we'll have to see.
That might be the one where he handles it based upon the name. Yeah. Let's
Might
see.
be. It might be. If not, then perhaps when he becomes a warlord in the next book after that, we'll figure it out. But I promise you that by the time we get to novel number 7, Charles will definitely have figured stuff out and made it right. I promise you, he'll have done that.
Yeah.
But he's unfortunately, again, he's a fictional character. So, but they're going to do it. They're going to do it. The question is, how do we get around it, and if possible, screw it up for them?
Yep. I think the number one, you have to start with accepting reality, knowing that your travel is going to be restricted and limited in ways you can't imagine. We don't know exactly how and when it's going to come out, but it's going to happen. So that alone, with that knowledge, what would you do differently? How would you, where would you be so that you are more, might give you more options, or a place where you don't mind being stuck, or maybe it has to do with where some of your assets are. I mean, you have to assume if they're regulating the movement of people, I think regulating the movement of capital comes first. Don't you think?
It definitely does. There's no question they're going to do that. There are going to be foreign exchange controls of one type or another, and a clever, subtle, easy, and a very effective way to do it is with these central bank digital currencies, where if you're using currency, they'll know everything and be able to make what they think are appropriate adjustments immediately, whether you like it or not. There's all kinds of really ugly things that are just in the wings. We're just one crisis away from all kinds of bad shit happening.
It's true. This is the kind of thing that we're trying to tackle in the file. A big part of it is trying to be resilient to these things that are coming, and a lot of those things depend upon, I think, you'll increase your power by decreasing your dependency on centralized services. So a lot of these things are actually all opt-in. Like no one was actually forced to be vaccinated. I mean, they felt they were coerced. There were consequences, but no one was actually forced. No one was actually tied down and done that too. I mean, I'm not saying it didn't happen anywhere, but generally was not the case. People, was voluntary compliance. People went along with it. And so you want to reduce the ways that you can be coerced. And it's a big part of what, we're talking about in the file most recently. So if you guys are interested in that stuff, there's a link below. We'll talk about that there.
And it's good to have some psychological reinforcement with people that see things the same way and have more sources of information that they can put in the pot.
Yeah.
And that's a function of it also.
Big part of it. Yeah. Okay. Next question. Should we be buying uranium stocks yet? Now, you did actually, for file members, you did make a stock pick in there already that is uranium. So at least in that case, you thought yes. But in general, do you think that is uranium set up now? Is it at a point where it's time to buy?
Yeah, I believe it is, because this energy crisis thing, real or imagined, whichever it is, listen, in the end, reality exists and reality conquers all. And I don't see any form of mass power generation that makes sense other than nuclear. So I think there's going to be a nuclear resurgence, and even the idiot Greens will accept it, because at this point, there really are small, self-contained, variable nuclear power plants I mean, this can all be done. It'll happen. And uranium is the way things, well, you can say, well, it should be thorium. Okay, I buy that. But yeah, uranium is going to be where it's at. So let's hope that we get another bubble in uranium stocks. Please, Jesus, just give me one more boom. I promise I won't waste this one. That's the Texas oil man's dream. A bumper sticker that Texas oil men like to put on the back of their pickups, which used to have a Cadillac, but now they got a beat up old pickup and you have that bumper sticker.
This time. Yeah, that's amazing.
No, stick with uranium. Now's a good time.
Okay. Do you think that, what are your thoughts on gold confiscation? You know, the likelihood that they'll do it?
Yeah, these criminals can do, or will try to do almost everything. It's like gun confiscation.
Yeah.
They're very much in the same category, I think. So what are you going to do when they ask you to turn in all your guns? Well, got several options. I mean, more than just two, give it to them or not. You got a bunch of options. So it's the same thing with gold. You've got even more options with gold than you do with guns. Will they?
Both of these, this will still be mostly driven by voluntary compliance, right? I mean, they're not actually going to order tomorrow and take stuff.
Yeah, screw that. I don't believe in voluntary compliance. You know, I believed in being dragged, kicking and screaming and making their lives miserable along the way and inconvenient. And, you know, when the guy comes up to your house to ask you questions, maybe you got a 15-year-old kid that can slash all four of his tires. So
this
we can't.
Not advice necessarily, but it's a.
Well, that's just, you know,
hypothetical.
that's not a suggestion. It's just an idle thought that passed through my mind. I mean, stuff like that. If everybody did it, yeah, I think that might have an effect. Because it's like in that famous, I don't know, those paragraphs, that page in Solzhenitsyn, the one which I remember more than anything else. And I do want to recommend that people, I haven't read all 3 volumes. I've read a compilation in 1 volume of the Gulag Archipelago. But the one that stuck with me is when Solzhenitsyn says, yes, when they were walking up the stairs to take away, you know, one of our number, why didn't we attack them with crowbars or whatever we had? Instead, we just complied and let them take Sasha or whoever it was away in their van and waited for them to take away the next one.
And we didn't put our shoes on going down the stairs because we didn't want to wake up the neighbors.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, yeah.
It's understandable. I mean, you don't want to take the risk. You're playing the odds. Well, you know, that's how countries are, you know, the whole country hates their government and they hate each other and they hate themselves, but they comply. It's like East Germany, you know, they went along with it for decades.
Right. Yeah, I think, you know, in Solzhenitsyn's case, he describes like everybody thinking, you know, no, I didn't really do anything wrong. And I'm sure once I explain myself, they'll like, of course, my neighbor, he was probably justified them taking him, but like, I know I didn't do anything wrong. So when I talk to him, it'll be fine. I don't want to mess it up, you know, in advance by like resisting or being difficult. I want to be polite and respectful, and it didn't work. And I think the key problem is just a failure to recognize reality. Like if they really knew where they were, they really knew that it wouldn't matter what they said, you know, if they weren't so quick to, you know, justify, you know, the taking of their neighbor, you know, and assuming that he must have been a bad guy, then maybe they would have responded to it differently. But when you deny reality long enough, you end up just kind of convincing yourself to do silly things like wear masks.
And part of it is maybe not knowing who your neighbors really are. Are they likely to be, you know, little rats that'll roll over and work for the state? Or are they likely to be stand-up guys? And if they are, well, find out if they are. so that, you won't be all alone. I mean, like that, guy in Tiananmen Square stood against the tank, made a great photo opportunity. It was wonderful he did that. But if there'd been, if he had 10,000 buddies, maybe they could have, who knows? Listen, once these bad guys have control of the apparatus of the state, we're basically screwed.
Yeah.
Because, all those cops and soldiers and apparatchiks, they want to collect their checks because, they need the money and they don't want to put themselves at risk. So once you have the state and people are used to taking orders, we're basically screwed. So
this is because, going back to the thing we talked about at the beginning, people do not have any moral foundation. They do not know where they would draw the line. Like, they haven't thought it through. What's more important than, there are things more than important than making sure your mortgage payment's on time. There's more things more important than making sure that you're able to continue your career doing whatever. But I think that if people don't think about it, if they don't actually make the conscious decision, they end up going with the path of least resistance, and then little by little degrade themselves and hate themselves, and then that leads to a path of further compliance.
Yeah, and they don't know about anything. They don't have the basic informational foundation to even think these things out. All they know about is what the Kardashians are doing. I mean, it's and the powers that be encourage that.
Yeah, they do. All right, next question. Doug, did you read Peter Zeihan's new book, The End of the World is Just the Beginning?
Well, you and I have talked about Peter Zeihan, and I don't know who this guy really is. I mean, I know he's from Iowa, which is where you're from. I don't know how close.
There's a lot of people from Iowa, though. I don't.
That's right, there are.
I don't know.
So all I think I know about him is he worked for Stratfor for a decade or something like that.
Yep.
And at this time, he seems to, I think he's been taken under the wing of some subdivision of Agora, because they like to find people that are slick, that are glib, that are good presenters, who at least have a patina of knowledge, and promote them. And it seems to me that Zeihan's the kind of guy who says, yeah, I can use that. I'd like to be promoted, and I'd like to be famous, and I'd like my ideas.
Shill what? Yeah, okay, I'm your guy.
Exactly. And I've watched some of his video. I haven't read his book, cleverly titled, and I look at his, they're all cleverly, this is a clever guy, actually. Clever is pretty dangerous when you're talking about a person that's got, I think, knows very little about anything, except, in fact, I don't even know, has he, how many countries has he been to? His thing is global geopolitics. That's his gig. That's his. Yep. So I don't know. Where's he been? Where's he lived? Does he know any of this stuff, or is it all something he learned in a book? I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know either. The years I've been following him, and sometimes more closely than other times, I don't ever recall him on an international trip, but I'm sure he has, but probably, and I guarantee he's not been in everywhere like you have, but it does seem he's got this kind of armchair, general kind of approach, and he's very, he's hyper confident in his point of view.
Hyper confident, right? And it's funny when he does his videos, he does them from different places. So why is he going from one place to another? What's the economics in back of that? Maybe he's on a book tour right now, but
book tour and speaking circuit right now.
Is that right? Well, he's going to some, obscure places. So love to have his publisher. How's this book doing? Do we know if it's like on the top of the Amazon or New York Times lists or anything?
I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is because
Gotta be.
it's heavily promoted and it's everywhere. And people talk, I mean, people bring him up all the time to us. So, you know, the thing is, the thing is that really years ago, and I read his other two books. I read a little bit of his most recent one. You know, there were always some things that didn't seem right about, like, it seemed like he had blind spots. As the way I thought of it. And then, but now, like a lot of things the last couple of years, people are being exposed, I guess, more about their point of view. People are more open to talk about stuff. And one of the things he said the other day that just, I mean, it's so wrong. It makes me angry that he says it. And I'm like, why do I care? You know, why do I care? I'm hearing this. Why do I feel like I almost going and commenting on his video? I didn't, but I'm like, why would I do that? Why do I feel compelled? It's because it's so wrong. He talked about some, you know, the Russian, he's very, very anti-Russia. You know, he's in his picture in his Twitter profile, he's wearing a Ukrainian flag tie. I mean, and it has been from day one. He's been all aboard about it. And everything that happens, he spins as being really bad for Russia, awful for Russia, and really amazing for Ukraine. And he said recent drawback across this river that the Russians did. He described it as the most humiliating retreat by any modern military or by any military or any power since World War I. That's the way he described it. And I'm like, and then earlier tonight, when you mentioned Afghanistan, I'm like, that was 100,000 times more humiliating.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a stupid statement. Well, I didn't hear that, but, you know, I heard his glib presentation on US shipping, and he made a good point. The Jones Act, which says that you can't use foreign ships to transfer things within the US. It's got to be a US crew, US captain, boat built in the US, and everything's got to be US. But you can't do that economically because the maritime unions make everything impossible. So he says we should get rid of the Jones Act. Well, that's absolutely right. Except he says, and we ought to replace it with an intelligent type of regulation, which is something that he'll come up, you know, it's like the other guy has stupid regulation. We have good regulation. Exactly. So he's a statist. He's a dirigiste. He's a guy that wants to be a policymaker in Washington, D.C. So my guess is his thoughts are, of course, he'll come up with a good thought once in a while, but they're basically wrong-headed and worthless at best. But he's a great entertainer, so I'm sure he'll be successful. And most of the comments that I read under his, little
video updates,
video things, they all say, "Oh, Peter, you're a genius." And
oh yeah,
people are looking for somebody to explain the world to them.
And he also tells everybody America is going to be just fine. It's always America, all these problems in these different places. But it's like, but America, and we're going to have a little difficulty with this part, but compared to the rest of the world, America's going to be just fine.
I don't know whose payroll he's on. What's his source of income? And I'd like to know more about who the guy really is. What's his background?
The Paladin Network would be useful in a case like this.
Yes, it would. Yes, to find out.
For information. We're talking about the information part of it.
Exactly. The real skinny on Peter. Yeah. Somebody out there, a motivated computer guy should put the Paladin Network into effect. If you don't know what the Paladin Network is, then you're behind on reading the Charles Knight novels. I can't help but put that commercial in here inserted.
Actually, we had somebody in the file go through the book and every reference to it, put each reference to it in a document, and then basically build out based upon everything that's said about it. Like think through some of the technical issues around it, and how the rules work around identity protection and stuff like that. So like people are working on it within the file, and I'm hoping to put together a little working group in there where we can see how far it can go.
That's exciting.
That
That's
is,
ex-
I mean, you see people take initiative like that. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. So I love it. Let's see, Doug, next question. How do you define a good salesman? And what's your take on the art of persuasion, especially in the context of your hobby of attempting to take over third world countries?
Mhm. I, well, it took me as I learned to sell by doing, actually. Um, you've got to identify what that person wants or what you think he wants and what the problem is that he needs solved. He will make his life better, present him with the solution. And then this is the thing that many effective salesmen forget. Well, they're not effective if they forget this, is that after you get agreement that this solution that you presented will improve his life, and hopefully that's an objective fact, hopefully, you've got to ask for the order. All right, that's super. Hand him the pen.
Let's do this.
Right, exactly. And that's the part, that is the single biggest flaw with salesmen. Uh, if they're knowledgeable salesmen, they'll try to educate the customer on technical details. No, don't do that. That just confuses the issue. I mean, it's very important to be very knowledgeable, of course, but no.
Well, the other thing, if
What's the problem I'm going to solve with my product?
yeah, and I think that one of the asking for the order thing, one is it it does allow you to move forward, and you can waste a huge amount of time, and lots of things can happen after they express real interest in moving forward, and you don't ask for the order explicitly to close the deal. So the deal can fall apart if you don't do that. But even more, a lot of times they are telling you you're getting all the right impressions, all the right buying signals, but there might still be an objection there that until you say, well, let's do this thing then. Can we get started tomorrow? Like here's the, sign right here. Until you do that, that objection does not get flushed out. And so you end up by forcing that point of reality, you end up talking about reality. And there might've been some deep objection or some objection they didn't want to say because they didn't want to, they thought you were a nice kid and didn't want to discourage you, that comes to the table. And that's where the real learning happens, is in the conflict. So you got to ask for the order because you need them to say, nah, because I'm worried about this or whatever. You need to dig that out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And one way to do that is, I always find that you can ask somebody a question and they'll give you an answer. I do this when I'm talking to people trying to sell me something, or it's that you ask them a question. It's you try to get beneath the surface, the glib surface answer. And what I like to do is ask people a second question. Well, that's interesting. Other than that, what are you thinking of?
Yeah.
Then maybe you can get what's really on their mind.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, why do you think salespeople do not do that though? Why do you think they do not ask for the order? Why do you think they do not, get beyond that surface level?
That's a good question. Why are some people, I don't know, we'll have to examine this indeed. There have been volumes written about this, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've read a lot of sales books. My opinion is just simply that people think that conflict is bad. And so if I'm disagreeable, like if I say something like, well, let's go ahead and get started, then in my own head, I could feel like he might think I'm being too pushy and we're getting along so well. So why would I want to do that? Or he might be thinking that and it does cause conflict. It does cause that moment where someone actually has to say, where there's basically tacit agreement, but it becomes explicit agreement, when you actually ask for the deal. And so that creates a conflict moment, really. I think that's healthy, but those result in the conversation becoming genuine for the first time. So like, until you get below that surface level, you're always dealing with bullshit. Yeah. And I think people are afraid of ruining what's good, but they actually, until you get past the bullshit, you never get to the really good stuff. Not only do you not close a deal, but you don't get to the really good stuff in relationships.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it takes experience. It takes practice like anything else, I suppose.
But what do you think about this as it relates to persuasion then? Like talking about the country thing, your hobby is trying to convince people of a totally new, totally unusual idea. Like how do you think, I guess, how do you think about persuasion in those terms?
Well, question is it's been a hobby for a long time, and I've had a lot of really fun adventures in weird places. Uh, Pitching, uh, taking their country public on exchanges and radically reforming the economy and all this type of thing. And sometimes I've done it right, sometimes I've done it wrong, one thing or another. I guess I'm going to have one more kick at the cat. My guess, or at least my hope, is that it's going to be in the odd little island of, it's not a little island either, of Bougainville, which is on the edge of Papua New Guinea, in between, or the edge of the Solomon Islands. It's there. And so I'm involved in a copper deal that I'm helping finance right now. And yeah, we'll see in the next couple of years whether that gets off the ground. But if anybody's got a connection with, because I'm getting a little long in the tooth for this type of thing, it becomes unseemly after a certain period of time to be running around the world to dog shit places. But because I've done that, it's not as exciting as it used to be. But anybody that's got a good connection with a foreign head of state who's in trouble and would like to improve things for himself and for his country and for the world at large, well, maybe we can get together and go off on Mr. Toad's wild ride to some crazy place.
Yep. So if you got that connection, let us know in the comments or Telegram or in the file, of course. All right. Just a couple more questions here, Doug, and we'll be done. When the health passports are implemented worldwide, most likely 90% plus, this guy says, of the countries will sign on, and probably as much of the world's population. First of all, do you agree with those approximates that most people just go along with it? And secondly, do you foresee there being an alliance for free travel among the few countries who don't?
Well, let's hope that there is anyway. And it seems likely that there will be. There's going to be a few places that'll see the advantage to doing that. And there will be advantages to doing that. But most of these stupid governments will sign on. So the question is, how do we react to it to get around it? But they're going to do it. I mean, this is obviously the way to fly.
Yeah. The problem is that if it's primarily driven by the G20 countries, the airlines are all there. I mean,
yeah.
So it really changes, it makes things a lot more difficult, but you have to assume that ultimately, and this is the benefit of having a multipolar world, by the way, though, when you have the unipolar world, you can have the UN or the WHO come up with these policies, and, the US military essentially backing up, increasing cooperation among the nations. But when you have a multipolar system, I think it can end up a lot better. I mean, I think at least options.
Yep, I agree. And the world is going to become multipolar without doubt. It's a good reason to try to become as well-to-do as you can yourself, so that if you do want to go someplace, well, maybe you'll be able to hire a private jet as opposed to see if United Airlines lets you on board.
Yep. I mean, these restrictions were enforced by the private companies in the past, not really even the states. So you got to assume that that'll be the formula for the future. So
good chance of that. Right. Exactly.
Okay, Doug, just a couple more questions. Is it enough to know that the vaccine is bad, but still remaining unaware of how the path to societal destruction is being enacted? So he's saying, can Doug Casey's file be successful without everyone in it understanding the basis of the psychological manipulation that's being used to capture most of the population?
Well, we're going to have to increase the size of our file considerably before we can have an actual effect other than just trying to make things better for ourselves within the file. I don't know if that's a partial answer. So it'd be nice to see the file grow so we can know who our potential friends are anyway.
But do you think that one of the things I was saying with this guy's question was, how important is it to fully flesh out and diagnose the problem that, especially big complex problems like we're experiencing now? I mean, there's economic problems. There's I would argue a cabal of people that are trying to orchestrate bad things for humanity. And not saying you're saying that, but I would argue that. So complicated problems, if you try and follow those to its root, do you have to follow those problems to its root to truly understand it in order to be able to move toward a solution? How much diagnosis of the problem is required in order to have a solution?
Oh, well, is that the same as asking of the leaders that are making decisions, how many of them are going along out of stupidity and how many of them are going along out of active evil? Is that a partial answer?
Kind of, yeah. It's like, yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think it's similar.
Yeah. Yeah, well, somebody like Der Schwabenklaus is obviously not stupid, but he's definitely evil. I mean, it's like he's almost flaunting it with that Ming the Merciless outfit that apparently he sports.
Yeah, and I think it seems like his accent is just specifically, it's practiced.
It's like saying, you see, you fools, life does imitate art. I'll get a white cat, but yes, I'm James Bond's Dr. Blofeld or whoever it is.
Yep. It's amazing. It's amazing.
It's amazing. It makes me think it's further proof for the fact that this world is an artificial construct, because this is just, it's almost too comical that you come up with people like that.
Yeah, it is like central casting. It's amazing.
It is. And his little muchacho de Mantequilla novel who whatever the hell his name is, that writes the books. I mean, these people are, it's like, and that woman that what is she doing now? Is she the head of the European Central Bank or something? That ex-precision swimmer that's tall, blonde, used to be head.
You mean, Lagarde, you mean?
Yes.
She's central bank, and then you have Ursula von der Leyen.
Yes, the Ursula, the she-wolf of the SS. I mean, these characters are all like, they're all like out of a novel. It's amazing, but they're pulling the strings and they have the power. I gotta believe it's all going to come apart. I want to believe it's all going to come apart, because it's really, these people live in a snake pit, and at some point they're going to start biting each other. I just hope it doesn't spread from the snake pit to the world at large. It could with this war in the Ukraine.
Or the buttons they're pushing in China now.
Oh, that's right. And who knows what that black swan that we're not thinking about right now, but is circling out there someplace to.
Yep. Okay, Doug, someone asked about a stock we talked about, I don't know, last year at some point, Cryomass. It's a cannabis technology stock. Do you have any thoughts or updates on it? Do you still own it? Have you been paying attention to it at all?
Yeah, I still own it. I have a pretty good sized position in it, actually. And the reason that I own it is because the two guys that are in back of the stock are both rich and successful. That's very helpful. They're not in this thing because they want to be involved in a 23-cent 25 cent or whatever it is stock. That's roughly where it is right now. It's got, and it's not really a cannabis stock because the cannabis bubble has burst. I'm not sure that that's a bubble that's ever going to reinflate because growing cannabis is it's like growing a very heavily regulated and heavily taxed form of alfalfa. How much sense does that make? Too much. And retailing the stuff, it's the same problem. But so what these guys in Cryomass, to refamiliarize you with it, is they have a machine, a technology that through using ultra cold makes it, when you're harvesting the buds, gives you much better results at much lower costs with less damage and so forth. So that's what it is. That's what this company is supposed to do. And Nick Giambruno liked the story so much that he stayed on top of it. I should have called Nick in the last few days and asked him, because he stays on top of these things, from day to day, how the company is currently doing. But I think the original proposition, why I bought it and own it, still seems to be in effect. I hope I'm right. But nobody's lost a lot of money on this. The thing is, I mean, the stock has been in a range from like the low 20s to the mid 50s. It's, and that's.
I think I just hadn't heard you talk about it in a while, so I just wanted to know your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
I mean,
as a stock in this market, this crappy little penny stock qualifies as a pretty stable company.
Exactly. I know. Unbelievably. Yeah. I mean, the best thing about it, I think, is that it is the technology has to be, they need distribution, they need to sell it, but, and get these things manufactured. But I think the thing that I like about it is that it is it's more like selling picks and shovels to the gold miners rather than trying to go mine gold, which is what everybody did. And what still is a lot of energy still going into these cannabis companies. And I just don't think I don't think there's any gold there. But if you can sell the people who are running a business and making some money, that'll increase their margins by 10%. The math works out pretty well. And I think I'm not saying that's exactly what their pitch is, but it's something like that.
Yeah, and there's talking about increasing people's margins by a lot more than 10%. And they're in an unregulated area of the market, and they don't have to deal with the public, which is, I think, kind of helpful. So, well, we'll see. We'll give it a little bit more time. And the next time somebody asks the question, I promise I'll have a current answer on how the company's doing fundamentally.
Okay. Doug, one last question here. What would you consider your greatest success and your greatest failure?
Yeah. That's almost like a cosmic question. I really don't know. Greatest success.
And I was thinking about it. Is it an event? Like, is it like a,
yeah.
You almost think of like a success would be like, you winning the Super Bowl championship, right? That's kind of thing that you put in your success column. But it's like life is not like that.
But no, I can't think of anything. I see this all as more of a process than individual things, a process. Right. So the process should be a success that should not result in failure and should make you happy with general success. But, sure, let's suppose we go to Bougainville next year and talk to a bunch of Paramount chiefs, and they say, damn, Doug, that's a hell of an idea. Let's do it. Well, I'd have to chalk that up as a major success.
Yep. Oh, it would be. It really would be.
It really would be. But I'm flummoxed. I can't think of anything, and I haven't had any, disaster that was, that I really think of as, oh, that was a disaster. No, I guess I've had it.
You must have some that in the moment you thought of as a disaster.
Oh, God, in the moment, yeah, sure, especially when you're a teenager. I mean, getting turned down for a date by the girl you asked, that seems like a
Critical
catastrophe.
failure. Worst
Yeah,
thing in your life.
it does. It does. So, no answer. Maybe somebody can come up with some.
I think that's really tough because I was trying to think about this question. I was like, how do you even, if I was an athlete, and my life were in these very measurable, very controllable games, like structured, then it's there's a win and loss column, there's that kind of thing. But life is incredibly unstructured and fluid. And it's not like there's never actually, there's never something where it's a clear win loss. A lot of times when you feel like it's a loss, almost everybody, something bad happens. You go, man, that was terrible. I made a mistake, big failure. Later you look at it and go, thank goodness, because this happened. Now I avoided this other problem. It's like,
You're absolutely right. That reminds me, I tried to run a business once and it was a catastrophe financially. And it felt horrible at the time, but if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have opened up. It was for that reason I decided to write a book, and my whole life changed for the better because this business collapsed. So, for every door that closes, maybe there's two that open. So,
yeah, it's like success is it's a strategy more than an event. I think, it's an approach to things. And I think the failure part, the number one thing is you must avoid catastrophic failure. That's the thing. Like, you don't want to get yourself paralyzed or killed, and you don't want to lose all. You want to get yourself over leveraged and, exposed to great risk in the markets. I mean, like, it's just like avoid catastrophic failure and assume that it can always happen at any time.
that's so true. You've got to have damage control. It's important whether
Whether you're driving through the Swiss Alps and you get head-on collision with a truck or whatever, right?
yeah. Yeah, well, sometimes the fickle finger of fate plays a role.
Yep, that's right. Okay. I just I think that's probably that the other question is a crypto question, which I don't expect either one of us have a good answer for.
No.
So when we had Marco's call, like Marco, it might be the most divisive guest we've ever had on. And not just this time, last time too. There are some people that are like, man, this guy's so smart. And there's some people that I don't know if they think he's dumb, but they hate him. I mean, they just can't stand him. And
Marco is very, very smart, no question. But why do they hate him?
I think because there's a weird there's an ideology tied to crypto, like especially the difference between crypto and Bitcoin. Like there's a war between these two ideologies. And I mean, I'm on this much more on the side, like Nick G and Bruno. I'm on the side of the Bitcoin on this. Bitcoin's different than all that other shit. It's different. And whereas, so when Marco said something like, the hardest money in the world was actually Ethereum, like people just basically just shit themselves. Like that idea to them, it makes them so insane. And I don't know, I have no opinion on it, but I think the thing that people don't get about Marco is very intellectually flexible. And he said, I could make an argument for this. I could make an argument for that. He wasn't actually staking an ideological position, which is actually what you want as a person who's managing a hedge fund.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, of course, I'm involved in this hedge fund and from the inception. And so far, the money that I put in it, 6 figures, it went up 600% from inception to the peak, and now it's back to zero again. And
but back to even,
exactly. And I said to Marco, I said, look, I didn't want to stick my nose in this. And I know the fund is structured in a certain way, but after you get a 6-to-1 run in a couple of 3 months or whatever it is, wouldn't it have made sense to just give everybody their money back so nobody can walk away unhappy. In fact, give them twice their money back. And then they think you're a genius, even if you lost 100% of what was left. But he said, no, blah, blah, blah. There's reasons. I'm okay, that's fine. So I'm in for the ride. And I hope Marco, picks that 1,000 to 1 shot and decides to collapse the fund at the top. Well, Willie, I don't know.
Hope so too. But so people have crypto questions. We're not the best people for those crypto questions. People like Marco and lots of others will be better for those. So we answer some here, but we don't, it's not really a topic we are the guys to cover it all.
No, it's actually a highly technical area, and I'm not interested in getting too involved in it.
Yep. Agreed. Okay. All right, Doug, we'll leave it there for today. Thank you very much. I hope you have a great weekend, and we'll be back next week.
Thanks, Matt.